Have you ever thought about what your children are going to remember about you when they get older? It's not the spotless house or the perfectly executed chore chart. It's not the organic meals or the beautiful minimalist home. We all know that, right? It's the little things. They're going to remember the way that you looked at them when they spilled their milk for the third time that morning. They'll remember the atmosphere that hung in the air when they woke up, when they walked through the door, and when they crawled into your lap. They will remember if their mother was joyful. And I'll be honest, that understanding used to make me ache inside because I knew that the tone of my home wasn't joyful. It was survival. But I've learned something that has changed everything for me. Peace and joy isn't found in the quiet moments. It's shaped through the chaotic ones. The joyful mom is not some rare unicorn who never gets tired or frustrated. She's simply a woman who has learned the power of micro surrendering, tiny, hidden, moment by moment acts of surrender to Christ. Not once a week or not just in her devotional time when her cup is filled up, but in the thick of it all. When the baby won't nap, when she's burned the dinner, when the toddler is screaming at her feet and she's tempted to scream right back, right there in the most ordinary and aggravating moments, that's where peace and true joy is born. All right, so let's pretend that we are together. We're curled up in a cozy living room with tea in our hands and little ones breaking up our conversation. And I'm going to share with you today my main point and my theory about how I think moms can be more joyful, then how to actually do it, and finally, some really practical tips that I learned from somewhere that was really unexpected. This is the system that helped me go from angry and overwhelmed mothering to being peaceful and present, even while raising little ones and even when things didn't change around me. So, if your days feel like a blur of overwhelm and overstimulation, if your temper scares you, and if you feel like you're failing at something that you wanted so badly, I see you. I'm Kiri. I'm a Christian mom of three, and this channel exists to help women like you create joyful, peaceful homes from the inside out. If you've been longing to feel calm, to mother from a place of love instead of stress, and to rebuild your home without expensive therapy or supplements or decluttering marathons, I would love for you to subscribe. And if you're wondering how I went from white knuckling every day to becoming a joyful mother who loves her role, I walk through the exact system that brought me there in my free workshop. You can watch it anytime, just click the link below. All right, so my firstborn was incredibly colicky. I'm talking blue in the face, inconsolable, hours long screaming. We're talking like maybe a couple hours in a 24-hour period where he wasn't crying. It was so hard. And I knew in my gut that something wasn't right. My mama instincts told me that he was in pain. But I was a brand new mom, and every time I voiced that concern, people would just say, "Babies cry, Kiri." And I started to feel silly for even speaking up. Like I was being dramatic or like I just couldn't hack it. So I stopped going out. I isolated myself. And my son, he would lose it in the car seat. He would scream in the stroller. And so I was trapped. I couldn't even go for walks outside of my house. I was trapped. I was a prisoner in my own home. And I felt like I was failing. I was failing at this motherhood thing. And I felt like I couldn't help my son, who was clearly in pain. And honestly, I felt like God had completely abandoned me. And so one day, I got my son down for a nap, finally, and I had slumped on the couch and I just sobbed. And then I said something to God that I instantly regretted. I said, "I'm done. I'm done with you. How could you make me go through this and not help me help him?" And that came out of the depths of my exhaustion and the fear that I had and the despair that I was living in. And I told God that I was done walking as a Christian because what was the point? I had asked, I had begged, I had pleaded for help, I had tried to do everything right, and still he was silent. Still, my baby was in pain. And I wasn't truly done, and God knew that. But in that moment, I had surrendered, just not in the right way, not to him. I had surrendered to despair and fear and to the lie that God didn't care. And here's the part that I still marvel at with our amazing, gracious, merciful God. Within a couple days from that moment, we had an appointment with our naturopath who told me to cut out dairy and eggs from my diet. So I did. And my son was healed within a couple of weeks. And within a couple of days, he was significantly better. And so God had answered in a really practical, tangible way that required me to lay something down. And in return, God gave me peace and he gave comfort to my baby. This is why 1 Peter 1:7 means so much to me. It says, so that the tested genuineness of your faith, more precious than gold that perishes though it is tested by fire, may be found to result in praise and glory and honor at the revelation of Jesus Christ. God wasn't trying to destroy me, he was refining me. He used my exhaustion and my misdirected surrender to test and strengthen my faith. And he used it to teach me something really foundational, which is that peace doesn't come from everything being fixed around you. Peace comes when you yield to God in the middle of the mess. And when you learn to do that as a mother, your joy will return. Okay, so there's this term that psychologists use called cognitive reframing with an internal locus of control. Basically, it's the ability to take a situation, say your toddler throwing a tantrum, and to choose to reinterpret it, not as a personal attack, not as a problem to panic over, but as an opportunity for obedience. Cognitive reframing means that I don't just accept chaos, I actually choose to see it differently. And an internal locus of control means that I believe my response is my responsibility, not my child's fault, not my husband's, not my hormones, mine. I don't always agree with secular psychology, okay? Let me just say that. In fact, much of it, its roots, its conclusions, its detachment from spiritual reality can veer far from the truth. Many of its frameworks are built on assumptions that deny God, glorify self, and treat symptoms without addressing your soul. But I also know this. God created our brains. He designed how they function and he wired them for growth, renewal, and transformation. That's why he made them plastic. So when psychology stumbles upon something helpful like cognitive reframing, it's not some stroke of brilliance from the minds of men. It's simply a shadow of what God had already built into the design. All truth is God's truth, and even the most secular insights, when they're right, are just borrowing from God's wisdom. So I take what's true, I test it with scripture, and then I toss out the rest. James 1:2-4 says, count it all joy, my brothers, when you meet trials of various kinds, for you know that the testing of your faith produces steadfastness. And let steadfastness have its full effect, that you may be perfect and complete, lacking in nothing. Micro surrender is biblical cognitive reframing in action. It says, this meltdown doesn't control me. I can choose gentleness. This disrespect hurts, but I will not sin in my anger. I will find the obedience here, and I will be a faithful servant. So you can reframe a ruined nap, let's say, as a moment to model patience. You can reframe a messy living room as a sign of abundant life being lived in your home. This doesn't mean we fake happiness. It means we invite truth to reinterpret our trials. This shift of reframing the chaos and taking back responsibility for our responses completely changed how my home feels. But it wasn't just one shift, it was an entire system of biblical, emotional, and practical tools. And here's something that I didn't realize at first. The reason that it all felt so hard wasn't just because I lacked self-discipline or I was ungrateful. It was because my nervous system was constantly in fight or flight mode. I was operating out of literal survival mode, and I think so many moms are experiencing this without even knowing it. Every little stressor felt like an emergency. Every tantrum or mess or every unmet expectation sent my body into panic mode because it was already living in a state of fight or flight. Learning how to calm my nervous system through biblical truth, practical rhythms, and mindset shifts was a turning point. It gave me access to the part of me that could respond with patience instead of panic, and I finally felt like the gentle, loving mother and wife that I had always dreamt of being. So I walk you through that full system in my free workshop. It's called From Survival Mode to Peace-Filled Homemaking in 7 days. And if you haven't watched it yet, I would love for you to join me. The link is below. Here's what one mom had to say after working through these principles. Before Kiri's program, I was exhausted, anxious, and felt like I was barely keeping up with my kids. Kiri showed me how to calm my mind, organize my day with grace, and actually enjoy motherhood instead of just surviving it. So now I'm going to get into the practical tips. So we talked about cognitive reframing and how you can be in control of your response to things. And we've talked about micro surrendering and giving it all to God. But now I want to talk about really practical tips. And I got these from a really unexpected source. Okay, so I was recently watching a video of a mom and she was calling into that show. I think it's like John Deloney or something. It's on the Ramsey Network. And to be honest, I loved and hated his response all at the same time. But, anyways, as this gal was talking, I caught myself holding my breath because I was almost nervous about how he was going to respond and what advice he was going to give her. She was talking about how much she truly hates her life as a stay-at-home mom to 3 children under the age of 4. I think she had a 3-year-old and then a set of 1-year-old twins. Anyway, I was on the edge of my seat, you guys. I was just so curious about what he'd have to say. I think partly because I've felt exactly the way that she was feeling before, and I was interested in the man's perspective. And then I also think partly because I'm not actually sure if he's a Christian. I don't think so. And so I was just curious what he would have to say. Anyway, his response was both validating and really off-putting at the same time. So he said, she was explaining her situation, and he said, "Yeah, that's why. Your life sucks right now." And I laughed, not because it was funny, but because it was honest. And he didn't sugarcoat it. He didn't try and make her feel guilty for being tired or overwhelmed or just not liking her life in that season. But at the same time, I hated it because, well, see my previous points about cognitive reframing and micro surrendering. But more importantly, here's why I felt the ick in his response. He treats mom burnout as purely a horizontal problem. But a believer's deepest fuel is Colossians 3:23, whatever you do, work heartily as for the Lord. That eternal frame is absent, so his counsel lands half empty for me. Scripture calls these years of giving so much of ourselves a living sacrifice in Romans 12:1. This John Deloney guy, his worldview can only offer grit until it passes, right? But the gospel offers purpose in the grind. Christ says, "Share in my suffering, and I will give you peace that surpasses understanding." Okay, but then in this conversation, the pendulum swung to the other side again, and he said something that had my jaw drop. And it just made total sense to me, and I think it will for you too. He said, there was some old Native American wisdom that was actually cross-cultural that went something like this: no mother should ever be left alone with a crying baby. And that validation was so real, so good. Then he said to her, and I'm wondering if this, "I hate my life, I hate all this stuff, it's all too loud," is because you're trying to do it all by yourself. And I thought, yes, that's the wound. The pain isn't just the noise or the diapers or the mess, it's the loneliness. Y'all, I was on the edge of my seat throughout this whole call. It was so good. So he goes on to say that loneliness is the real cancer, that mothers aren't meant to carry this alone. And that part I agreed with fully. Then he gave some really practical, unconventional advice. And I think that we as moms need to hear it. And I think that if you do and really try to implement some of these super practical tips, you will have so much more joy in your mothering. So this gal, the caller, she was upset that she had no help from family, and he actually used the cognitive reframing tip that I gave earlier in this video to help her think differently about the situation. And I think a lot of us mothers these days can really relate to not having that village that we'd hoped for. So his response to her was, stop waiting on unhelpful family, grieve that they won't help, then pivot. He said, they told you no, now it's time to get creative. So his core point was to stop fixating on who won't help and to start building a community of people who might. So he encourages her to stop waiting for the perfect village and start architecting her own community. I think as moms, we keep waiting for the perfect solution to needing help. That full night out, the spouse who jumps in more, the grandmother who swoops in right when you need it. But what if that never comes? That is being a steward rather than a victim, and I thought that was wise counsel. Okay, so his tips for building a support network were pretty good and might help you think outside of the box if you're a mother who just actually needs help. Very practically, you're like, yeah, I just actually need help though. Okay, so his advice was to hire a teenager, not just to babysit even, but just to play with your kids while you're still home. Even that much can give your soul such a breath when it's not all on you to take care of all the children, but that you can actually just have another body in your house helping. So maybe look in your neighborhood or ask around at your church if there are any teenagers who are looking for some extra cash. Or you could start a mom swap. So if you don't want to pay any money at all, then ask some local moms if they want to swap, care. You could invite friends over. So even if they're busy, ask anyway. Most people are lonelier than they let on and probably not as busy as you think they are. And this John Deloney guy, he said, you all think each other are too busy, but most moms are drowning just like you. So I thought that was good. Just invite friends over. And then he said, invite even the friends without kids. Say, hey, come over. I'll make breakfast. I'll make coffee. Just come and talk to me. And guys, that is so important to just have other people to talk to. Then he said something like this. I know it's a pain to get those 3 kids out of the house, but staying inside all day is slowly wearing down your soul. Find a park, find a nature preserve, take them to something. You won't go there to rest. You'll be running all over the place. But the novelty, the stimulation, seeing another parent or 2 or 3 or 5, you get to make eye contact with another adult and just relate to them, and that will fill your soul. And then he goes on and he says, when somebody says, I really need childcare, but it costs $1 million a kid, I say, math doesn't care what you think you need. You can't afford it. And then he says, just like if someone eats only what they like, your body doesn't care. You have to meet the energy demand. His point was this, it's chaotic either way, but doing it alone inside the 4 walls of your own house will crush you. Get out even if it's hard. And I think that that is one thing that mothers with young children find it really hard to do. It can be paralyzing. I've been there before. You're in these seasons where, and actually I told a story about my colicky baby in the beginning of this video, where it was too hard to get out of the house and I isolated myself and, I didn't work that muscle. And then I had my second and I forced myself to work the muscle. Yes, it was harder to get out of the house with 2 kids. It was harder than getting out with just the 1 kid. But the quicker and more you can work that muscle of getting out of the house and doing the hard thing, the easier it will actually become. And now with 3 kids, it's just chaos all the time. And so, yeah, like you said, it's chaotic either way, but yeah, you have to get out. It'll feed your soul. So I think those were just really good practical tips. I think that they'll make you a much more joyful mother if you do that. And I think that somebody needed to hear this. So anyway, you don't have to wait until your kids are older to be a joyful mom. You don't have to wait until things calm down. You don't have to keep trying to fix everything around you before you allow peace inside of you. If you feel stuck in survival mode, I would love to walk you through the same steps that I followed in my free workshop, so you can use that link below. Anyway, it's always such a joy to have you here, and if you're wondering why 81% of moms experience burnout and how to fix it, watch this next video.